moving forward, we are heading into the next session of this particular discussion. As the world goes digital, the rapid proliferation of revolutionary technology is unleashing dangerous new cyber threats that are putting many businesses, critical infrastructure, even human lives at risk. Our next panel discussion will talk about the cybersecurity in hyperconnected world. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now love to call upon the moderator, Mr. Vinayak Godse, the CEO of DSCI, to kindly please decorate the dais for the next set of panel discussion, along with the panelist, Dr. Mahesh Kalyanaraman, the Associate Vice President, Risk Solution Advisory, Risk and Compliance HCL Tech, Mr. Prakash Veeramani, the CTO, APAC, RRD, Go Creative, Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan, the CISO, Intellect Design Arena Limited, and Mr. Kannan Srinivasan, the Head of Cybersecurity and Data Privacy, GAVS Technologies Private Limited.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction of this panel. And so in this particular panel, so any discussion nowadays in in the technology, right? Cybersecurity is becoming such an important thing. So they say there's an ASCOM Tech Decade report which talked about the next 10 years, which will be called as a technology decade or decade kind of a language that we use. So the three foundation technologies, right? So which will be probably making the success of this technology transformation critical. So one is the AI ML, other is the cloud computing, and third is cybersecurity. So now cybersecurity is becoming such a fundamental, core, important, critical area, especially in the hyper-connected world. And to cover that, we have quite a good engaging panel here. All of them are leaders, SCL, Intellect Design, and CEO, CTO, CTO kind of role, plus data privacy role. So we'll try to unveil what do you mean by, we all know, we had been using this word, what do you mean by the hyper-connected world, and what are exactly the security challenges that we see at this point of time, and how they will be significantly becoming difficult to manage as well because of the world that we are going in. And what are those strategies that we should think about from cybersecurity perspective? So with this, I will really like to start with Kannan, with you. So help us understand what exactly hyper-connected means and how that relates to cybersecurity.
Thank you. So in the hyper-connected world, right, what is happening is people, the things and data, everything come together. Now, let me take an example of what is happening in the healthcare industry, where we do a lot of cybersecurity related work for healthcare industry. So today, if you look at it, with so much amount of change happening in the healthcare, the implanted devices and wearable, right? Like, I mean, they constantly communicating about your health status. And in case, if you have any issues or like, I mean, if you are having some kind of an attack, so it immediately, when I say heart attack or any health issues, it immediately communicates to the hospital network. So somebody is going to, like, I mean, a doctor is going to attend to you through a metaverse. He's going to analyze, he's going to talk to you and give you the prescription, or if you require any operation or something to be done. So you'll be immediately taken to the nearest hospital where the operation is carried out by a robot. And that robot is controlled by a doctor who is sitting from some different location. And the post-operative care, like, I mean, it is completely taken care through metaverse, right? So this is where the world is heading towards in the hyper-connected world with the 5G technology, with too much amount of bandwidth and low latency. Like, I mean, this is becoming a reality today. Now, even a small vulnerability in any of this process can lead to a disastrous situation, right? Like, I mean, somebody's life is at stake. So this is where the cybersecurity, comes in picture in this whole life cycle, where you identify all the issues, you prevent and put the controls so that, like, I mean, there are no issues or vulnerabilities in the system, detect, respond, and recover in case of any incident. At the same time, making sure none of the patient or, like, I mean, any individual is getting affected.
So Prakash, when we are designing and developing systems, right, and digitization is the process that we are seeing not only the IT, but now most of the physical world sectors are also digitized quite significantly, right? And in that, we try to leverage the capabilities and solutions available in market, right? And help us understand this entire development process, the way it is evolving, right? And how that is making it complicated on one hand, but on the other hand, how the connectivity is really adding value to the things that we have been designing, any process, any product that we have been designing.
Yeah, so from the background I come from an ITES standpoint of the world, we used to run our systems predominantly in our data centers in a controlled environment at least a decade back, which is no longer the case now, where we have to go cloud. And it's not just about getting to the cloud, and you also integrate your SaaS platforms with your corporate systems when you integrate them. And we look at it right from the beginning of the journey, how the risk assessment is carried out, which is a very, very crucial factor. We don't want to be miss that boat and come and join at the later part. So you need to involve the cybersec process right from the beginning stage. Where are the data touch points that are coming from? How the exchange of information is happening? Where are you drawing the demarcation line? And also look at the remediation efforts and control assessments to that. Or the critical factors when we integrate the whole ecosystem, and how well is our response system designed as well in case of an exposure is experienced. If I take an example of a ransomware as an example, look at the evolution it has carried over a period of time. It began with saying it's targeting endpoints, just encrypting some files in your endpoints, and then asking you to demand and pay. Then it moved on to what are the whole vulnerabilities exist in your IT ecosystem, and look at saying predominantly targeting the IT organizations. Then the next evolution is targeting towards a complete business disruption, not just a segment, a complete business disruption, as well as threatening you to post the data online if you don't pay. And the threat actors today are, highly sophisticated with the artificial intelligence capability and machine learning capabilities, where the access to the tools are readily available for those people. And the threat actors stay in your ecosystem for more than, few weeks. So it's not about just identifying something and leaving it there. You need to do a holistic approach of, looking at this whole ecosystem. To drive the value in terms of how best it is coming. And another factor is also contributing is your user behaviors, which is a very important element in terms of how we bring the user education into this whole ecosystem. And cybersec is not just responsibility of few people. It's the whole part that needs to come into play, and you drive along with them. All these factors have to play a crucial role for you to keep that going in a very controlled way.
So, Lakshmi, as a CISO, right? So, your business are going rampant in terms of digitization, right? And they have been, one day themselves have been putting applications together, volume and velocity of development of application and deployment is also rising quite significantly. There are a lot of diverse devices getting connected. There are a lot of capabilities that we talk about in terms of the IoT, in terms of the cloud, in terms of the so many other areas that we have been looking at. Robotics is also now coming to play a lot of important role. So when the organizations is trying to make all this digitization, a rampant digitization plan, as a CISO basically, right? So how do you see this from your perspective basically? Is it still a manageable kind of animal from the security and privacy perspective?
Okay, thanks Vinayak for this question and opportunity. So yes, it is evolving. The landscape is evolving as such. Especially in a hyper-connected world, me coming from BFSI sector, for a common man, the digital experience, the digital banking that is being offered, right? Today it has to be on an omni-channel platform. Yeah. So it is the same code base which is servicing multiple channels. Yeah. Have we thought through about the different attack surfaces that are there in different channels? So that is something that we need to explore and make sure that that is being taken care of. So when we talk about omni-channel, when we talk about hyper-connected world, so we generally do a risk assessment or device-centric assessment. So if we do a assessment of sorts, probably the data categorization will miss out the mobile device-related data that is being captured. Right? In a web scenario, it may not capture your device ID, it may not capture so many other parameters which just generally gets captured as part of your mobile, unless and until you are very specific to restrict some of those privileges. Right? So those are something that we have to be very careful from a data categorization, data extraction perspective. And then it's not just about the solution that we are offering, it's the landscape in which we are operating. Basically, in a hyper-connected world, we talk about, we all know about CDN, we all know about DNS and so on and so forth, a lot of services that have been offered. So what is the security control that we can rely upon on those service providers? So we know 1 year back, some of those prominent players had some breaches and 10% of the entire globe lost the internet access in terms of sites and other things.
Yeah, and we have seen
it's
this could
enormous.
happen to the larger, bigger CSP provider which have been providing services to the billions of the people. We have seen that disruption happening, right? So, Mahesh, coming to you, when this is getting so interdependent, so interconnected, each of us has been now building solutions. We have data, we are giving others today data in terms of API. We're leveraging other APIs as well. So we're getting a lot of interfaces in together. So the entire transaction that is happening, be it a financial transaction or any business transaction you do, is getting so unbundled to get a lot of third-party vendor ecosystem, larger, bigger players who are thought about will be using something like Google to initiate transaction, right? We'll be using something like WhatsApp to initiate the financial transaction, basically, right? So there are a lot of those possibilities that we see, and this unbundling is creating a lot of opportunity for entire ecosystem, but it's also creating a lot of challenges. So when you are looking at devising and designing security, so where exactly you start, and in this difficult, complex, interconnected, kind of a very high speed moving kind of a ecosystem actually?
First of all, the basic fundamental thing is your strong design and architecture. So in the traditional days, we were looking for LANs, WANs, and hosting in-house data centers and co-located data centers. But now everything is virtual, right? So I foresee that this is split into two. One is your underlying infra platform and the application platform. So right now what happens is the underlying platform is also in cloud, as well as the application platform is also on the cloud. And a lot of applications get integrated between each other, which is hosted outside your organization's boundary as well as within your organization's boundary. So in my opinion, the first thing to be taken care is a strong use case should be there for integration. Unless the use case is not there, don't think of integration, because the risk of getting so much of integration is, one, you lose track of what all application is getting integrated. And if there is an end of contract where you want to terminate the service of an application vendor, then you need to figure out how to disintegrate the integration. Unless you don't do this, your data will be polling with the other side service provider. Indirectly, you may not know to how long it is going to happen, you may not know. So knowing what you are going to integrate and sustaining it for a long time is very key. Whether it happens through APIs or any other means, that is immaterial.
Yeah, so coming to Kannan on this particular part, right? So, but then there is a business compulsion to move fast, right? There's a business compulsion to get a help of cloud capability offered by any part of the globe, right? And there is a business compulsion to work with startups as well. There is a business compulsion to, for example, many Indian banks has initially thought about it, they will not, but now they are using even Apple's Touch ID to do authentication to the banking application, right? And then also government is pushing hard in terms of working with startup basically, right? And then overall this ecosystem is becoming so interdependent. We are talking about API economy where we are forcing organization to make those API available for others to work on basically. In this compulsion and this force, inherent plus external force basically. So how do you make sure that this entire, the way Mahesh talked about life cycle of systems, right, from designing to operations, you take care of security challenges?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in today's world, you just can't say that I will work only with, tier 1 companies, right? Like, I mean, all the companies, you have to take advantage of some of the startups. If they have a great idea, you have to, leverage their strength so that you'll stay ahead of the competition. But what you need to take care from the security perspective is do a thorough third-party risk assessment. If they are your suppliers, do the supplier risk assessment properly. Take into consideration all the controls they have to protect your systems. Have they taken into consideration all the security aspects? Let's say, for example, if it is a threat modeling, right? as part of the design, have they thought about all these aspects in their design is what we need to check and make sure they have all the controls in place. And are they doing the security testing properly? So if you really look at the OASP and other guidelines, they give a lot of information about, like, I mean, how to do these kind of the security testing. But the security testing per se, right, like, I mean, if you look at some of the threat aspects from 2017 to 2021, a lot of new things are also getting added. Like, for example, taking care of the design, the secure design is one of the key elements that has been added. How do you ensure the software and data integrity is another aspect, and third one is the server side request process. So these are some of the new threats that has been identified, but you need to ensure your suppliers are taking care of all these aspects and have they address these issues in their software.
So Prakash, as a CTO, you design systems, right? And you make that also deploy also, right? And you talk about ransomware as a case, right? So we talked about, yes, assurance is important, OAS really helps you to assess things. We also talk about architecture, as Mahesh talked about basically. But when it happens, right? It happens, right? And that response that you underline basically, right? So no matter how much that you do in the chain, right? In the chain of all of this interconnect world, how do you make sure that the response is adequate? And we all know that security 6-7 years back was largely assessment and assurance. Most of us come from security with the background of doing risk assessment, consulting, auditing kind of background. But now security is largely managing real-time problem at that particular instance, right? So the attack is happening and you're responding, and response and recovery is becoming so important. Resilience is becoming so important. So in the technology, architectural, as well as the operational plan that you make, how do you make sure that it's significant effort is put on a response and recovery, and that too in this kind of a difficult, interconnected kind of ecosystem?
No, that's certainly a challenge, no doubt. In terms of, if you look at it from an execution on the ground and how you manage that, in my opinion, the first one that comes into play is your communication. The user awareness and communication of any such incident, and the training the users in terms of what are the do's and don'ts when such a situation happens. Most cases, the user base is not taken into account. That's where, and particularly for operations that are spread across in multiple geographies and multiple cultures, that process is very, very important. And secondly is also that is the operating network, how far it can be isolated from the core corporate network, and what kind of controls ecosystem that exists there, so that the widespread is not impacting the entire corporation, entire business. And the third aspect is also that is the affected environment can sustain in an isolated way, while the rest of the businesses can continue. While you try to minimize the disruptions as much as possible, that means we need to have a rigorous of your tabletop test, your executions, your mimic the scenario that this has happened, and how well the whole ecosystem of your InfoSec, your technology guys on the ground, your users, your customers, how they would respond in that system. We should not shy away in testing it out. Even if we have a failures, that's a great opportunity for us to improvise that. And fourth, and not the last one, is how well is your backups maintained? It's very, very important in the case of ransomware as an example. Yeah. And how far we go and test them, that your data is available at your hand, that you can respond back instead of reacting to your situation.
And nowadays, the ransomware's first attack is on backup system. So how you make backups more prone to the ransomware attack is also an important thing, because nowadays most of ransomware is crafted to first of all attack your backup system. They will be there for some time and then you'll start working on that. So only the backup is strategy, but making it foolproof from ransomware is another important thing. So coming to Lakshmi, right, as a CISO, right, the volume game is important, right? So millions of things can in this ecosystem, the way kind of transactions that we are seeing happening in India, because of some of the digital transactions we are seeing, we are processing almost 8-9 billion transactions because of OPI, right? And that's true with most of the organization, right? So the volume, managing the volume of the challenges basically, right? And One is that, and most of the time the situation is that you have to be successful 100 out of 100, whereas the attacker has to succeed only 1 out of 100 basically. In this very asymmetric thing, how you lay down the plan for security? Is it really management challenge or engineering challenge?
Okay, it's a mix of both. I would call it that way. Uh, Performance is at most importance, especially when we have a voluminous transaction. And the other way to do things is to design smartly the different channels of communications. So the same system will have uh, a thorough 100% foolproof mechanism as much as possible. Whereas when it goes and hits a switch where the transaction gets authorized, it will just rely upon the channel encryption. It may not probably do the data level encryption. It will be only relying upon channel level encryption so that your latency gets reduced. Right? So that's where you will have an end user experience of the transaction getting processed quickly. So we will have to smartly switch over to different kinds of controls and attack
So this
surface.
is very important thing that you talk about. Architectural decision of a security is not a security only, right?
That's right.
Performance, user experience also needs to be also adhered to, right? And that's why it's becoming more like a engineering discussion than a typical management discussion. Until it was like you buy a solution, you manage the solution basically. Help us understand some of the cases you must have dealt like this actually.
Yeah, I will take cues from what Kannan said. Threat model is a amazing technique that you may have to apply in any ecosystem, any solution, especially if it's in the nascent stage of development. And what we need to factor in that case is not just the solution that we are developing, as I said, it's the entire ecosystem where it's going to operate. Otherwise, if you generally do a data flow diagram or anything of that sort, you will only focus on the narrowed, siloed component where you will just receive a data, process it, and then you will flush it out. But you will not probably consider the different other system. In a banking scenario, we offer multiple kind of products. It may be a core banking, it can be a lending, it can be a collect, it can be a card management, but we have to interface with multiple other products. It can be from our own stable, it can be coming from a different partner vendor ecosystem, it may be in a different geography. So what we have to do is to factor all of those kinds of risk. And based on those risk appetite and controls models that are available, we will have to come up with an appropriate control framework that can be adopted by the team. So no framework at 100%. At the same time, we have to ensure that we have reasonable security in whatever we are giving to the customer.
Yeah, and that nothing is 100% secure, and that's makes us on our toe, and that's why we keep inventing and evolving in security. Let me bring the subject of privacy here, Mahesh, with you. Basically, we have now data protection top bill, which was notified by Government of India, right? And this interconnected world where so many entities are coming to help you execute the transactions and so many interfaces coming in picture, you not only use your own data, you give the data to others in API, you use others APIs to work on this one. So how do you make sure that we protect the rights? Because in India, privacy is a fundamental right now. So how do you make sure that in all of this discussion, we bring the subject of privacy and we work on areas that needs to be catered to comply with the obligations for the privacies and liabilities which are devised for privacy. And they are significant, 500 crore rupees, up to 500 crores kind of civil liability we are talking in this country.
So I think in the last 10 years, privacy as a domain has come a long journey. So I think in 2010s and earlier, privacy was not that great known to the entire community. But now at least the education is there, the knowledge, the awareness is there. So if you go and talk to any project people, they would immediately say privacy. What are the privacy concerns? So you have a privacy team in the organization. So first, in my opinion, first thing is, if you are going to do a business decision of procuring something, so get a use case of what's the data, what's the vendor ecosystem is going to supply you, and where the data is going to store, how you are going to move the data. That's very fundamental. You should know what you're getting and what data is going out of your network and get stored in the vendor's network. If it is within your jurisdiction, within your geography of operation, you have to check with the law, it governs it. Yep. And if it is going to go outside your borders, again check for the law which is going to govern that. Without knowing what's the law which is going to govern whether the data is to be stored inside the country or moving outside the country, I think making that procurement position itself is not a right decision.
So these are administrative arrangements for the privacy. But Prakash, as a role of CTO, right, you must be engineering solutions, and in that engineering, privacy also may get factors. So how do you engineer technology to take care of privacy obligations, basically?
So it's an evolving one in terms of the you won't believe even starts with the cultural aspect. How we exchange information between people, and what's up for business is a big question, was always there for B2Bs to look at it. You have your ways and mediums. Your customers come and put so much of control in place, saying, except my applications, you cannot access anything. And that puts a huge pressure on the users in terms of how they can collaborate and communicate. And it tries to go away from the platform. It's not that they are intentionally doing that. They were left with no option. And it starts with privacy there, in terms of how much broader control that you have in place. And also the responsibility is also, as I stated earlier, it comes from all channels from privacy standpoint, in terms of assessment, the system controls that we have in place, where the application's data are getting exchanged, and what kind of the user behavior comes into play. So all of these factors will also drive towards that responsibility of privacy.
Yeah, and coming to Lakshmi, because you work in a financial banking sector, and transaction processing is largely to do with the personal data of the individual, right? And many systems that you must have been building right now must be factoring the privacy as an important area. So how does the discussion influence or shapes the overall design that you must be locking from the security and privacy perspective?
Absolutely. See, in a financial industry, anything and everything starts with the KYC process.
Yeah. So, and this is the important. In your case, it's a data that you have to take, right? You're required to collect that data, not like you want to collect the data, because government want you to, or regulator want you to collect that data. Yeah.
So there are two scenarios where we operate. One where it's a product which is being designed and provided to the banks who will run and operate the solution on their behalf. In that case, it's only data privacy by design which applies to us predominantly. However, in the current context, because of a lot of laws that are coming out in the global arena, the DPA is also mandated for product companies.
No.
Right? So that is one obligation that is being passed on to us, whether we like it or not. So for the minimum set of things that we are supposed to be obligated, we need to get into that arrangement. That is one. The second scenario is where we run the bank on behalf of the bank, where we provide the end-to-end services.
Yeah. In a way, you own the banking operations in that.
In a way, that's right. We probably may not liaison with the end customer, but the back-end system and the complete operations will be taken care. Right? So in that scenario, handling data is of utmost importance for us, and especially in our sales guys are very passionate about finding clients. They go into nook and corners of Africa to find some new customers. I discovered,
and each of those geographies are now coming out with new very stringent privacy requirements.
Absolutely,
well.
That's where I am coming to.
Yeah.
So you talk about Kenya, you talk about South Africa. There are regions where you will be surprised to see their data privacy laws. Yeah. It is at par with GDPR, or in a way it is way beyond also. It's been tailor-made for their.
Almost 140 plus countries have now privacy legislation, and very stringent one as well.
So you can't escape from it. So what we do from an organization perspective, we generally study the overall design flow, and the control framework will define and apply for the specific set of RASI that we agree upon with the customer during the initial sign-off. And those are something that we will continuously monitor, maintain, and we will do a periodic DPIA and an assessment to ensure that hygiene is maintained throughout the life cycle. Yeah. So it's not a one-time activity. The life cycle is very important in this case. So that is something that we continue to do.
Kannan, we as a DSCI and NASCOM, we also focus on research happening in security and privacy. Plus we also look at startups in privacy, security and privacy area. Now there are many startups in India coming in privacy as well. Right? In the overall design that you make it work for security and privacy. So the role of innovation, and with you, I think then I'll come to the audience as well. How do you see the role of innovation research in the field of the cybersecurity for the hyper-connected world?
Yeah. So definitely one thing like Narasimhan said, right? We need to factor in the privacy by design
Yeah.
for sure. They have to think about, or if you look at the MyTray, right? They give a lot of information about how to defend or make sure your
Yeah.
product is secure. Some of them, I can think of are the data anonymization. So how do you make sure the data is anonymized? Continuous authentication, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
uh, are you ensuring that this is the right person who's supposed to access the data is accessing this data? And third one is what we call it as a digital provenance, meaning is this data originating from the right source? Meaning, if my watch is sending data to the central server, is this data really coming from this watch is what I need to factor in, right? So that's what we call it as a digital provenance. And next one is on the authentication alibis, wherein uh, it's also called as a life log, where it constantly keeps checking whether is it the right source of information that is getting passed on. And last but not the least, how do you bring in the AI element to make sure whether it's a right data that is getting passed, meaning um, if somebody is entering my bank balance is 100 million, right? It should immediately start thinking
Yeah,
like, hey, is
yeah.
it really
Because the
happen?
decision making also should trigger, some events should trigger the security decision
Exactly.
making as well. And that's why role of AIML in data, in cybersecurity, in privacy is quite significantly recognized. So we have another 5 to 6 minutes with us. So we had asked, I mean, we try to cover as much as ground as can cover in the shortest possible time we have for this panel. But do you have any, yeah, please. You want to?
Hi, I'm Anand Raj from IDP. Yeah. How do you protect your, PA data when you handle multinational, data and keep it in the cloud and which is in some other country? Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody want to? Mahesh, you can.
See, as I said, first you need to understand the use case of handling multi-geography data for a given scenario and look around the regulations around it. Sometimes what happens is if you are getting a project in from an MNC to be delivered from India, the source of data could be in US or Africa or EU. So you need to look into the regulations of those geographies and try to localize the data, store the data into localized one. And from your delivery center, I think pandemic has given us a lot of lessons in remote working. So initiate your remote working, go and connect to the source server where the data is stored, process the data there itself, sign off and come. You won't bring back the data into your geography. So that absolves you of all the risks of moving the data between geographies.
You are probably owning this operation and using the cloud. In that case, I think there is a share security model of the cloud. You need to know what you own, what cloud providers wants basically. And there are a lot of architectures, best practices has come to make sure that while leveraging cloud in multi-location, you can still ensure you are owning or you are controlling your data and also making sure of security as well. Actually. So you can add.
Just one more aspect I would add to that is also there is a clear demarcation of data owners, data processor, and data custodian. So if your operations is falling under the data processor, there are clear guidelines in those aspects of regulations also giving, as a data processor, you need to do certain things that you can still access those data, maybe within that boundary or maybe outside the boundary. As we all know, the cloud is spread across the globe. You can have certain data in those sectors itself, in those regions itself. But as a processor, you maybe need to follow certain practices and controls. You may be still allowed to handle them.
Any other question? Yeah, there is one. We'll take that as the last question and probably.
Hi. With the latest attack in Ames, lot of us accounts have accounts in the nationalized bank. How worried we should be?
How worried we should be, right? Any of you want to? I can definitely, because I happen to be knowing this kind of thing happening in the country better. See, this used to happen somewhere else, right? So we used to know about a big event, security event happen in other parts of the globe, but it's happening around us, right? It's happening near to us, and it could be happening to us as individual organization, to individual and organization as well, right? So there is definitely each of us as an individual and more importantly as an organization has to really beef up our security and privacy posture. One part is that, and secondly, many things of like this attack, many things you may not have control as well. So that's why that's why we call it as cybersecurity, because cybersecurity, most of the things are external driver, and most of the times you may not have yourself control to really come out of that actually, right? And that's why there is a national cybersecurity architecture is in making. So we have there is a CERT India, there's NCI PSC for the critical sector protection, there's a national cybersecurity coordinator, there's a lawmaking process. A lot of those aggregate level effort which has been now in place. And apart from that, a lot of collaborations also happens between the different technology players as well. So until now, security was more like a administrative arrangement you make, but it's now more technical, more operational, and operational governance is very critical now in security. As Prakash had highlighted that why the response, no matter you prepare a lot, you need to prepare for a lot, you need to protect a lot, but the response and recovery is very critically important, and we all should be preparing for that. Anybody want? Yeah. Go to Kannan.
See, cybersecurity incidents, it's continued to happen, right? So all you can do is, are you aware of these kind of things and how to protect yourself? If you are an organization, conduct a lot of user awareness sessions, wherein they are able to identify some of these incidents and they are able to protect it. Let's say, for example, if it is a phishing attack, right? At least on a periodic basis, do some simulation, try to understand whether your employees are able to identify if it's a phishing email, and they don't give their user ID and password. They don't click on any unwanted link that is coming in their WhatsApp or in their official email, right? So awareness is definitely one, and if your organization has some simulation tools, try to leverage it and do periodic phishing simulation so that they are aware and they know how to protect your environment.
Yeah, so with this probably we need to conclude this session because we are just right on the time, right? So, but just in 30 to 40 minutes, we try to cover really good ground in the subject that we have delved into. And for that, really thank all the co-panelists for helping me to contribute or probably cover significant ground in this one. Please join me to give the big hand to the co-panelists here. Thank you.